Welcome back, Paul Catalina and Pierre Nugent. Pierre, let's talk coaches. And let's start with Sean Miller, Xavier, on his way out the door to Texas. I saw a lot of mixed reaction to this among Texas fans, and my thought was hey, you remember he kind of got pushed out of Arizona because the DeAndre Ayton thing got to be this big deal of how much money they paid him, and he was kind of swept up in all of the pre-NIL, NIL, black bag kind of jobs that were going on, and he was not he and Will Wade are almost kind of the same here in that of all the guys that got caught up in it, they were the ones who were not the rosiest to be around. Right? And I don't think they're bully coaches like Woody Hayes or anything like that, like Bob Knight. They're just not, affable in the way that everybody would maybe want them to be. They're not Scott Drew or one of those guys who's just Scott Drew is honestly, he's a little ray of sunshine. Yeah. He's a little ray of sunshine. It's what he is. And everybody around him is a different little ray of sunshine. Grant McCaslin, not as much of a ray of sunshine, but a little ray of sunshine. Jerome Tang, this year when they weren't doing well, he wasn't a little ray of sunshine. Then he became a little ray of sunshine again, and they were doing well because that's how they're programmed. Will Wade, Sean Miller, not programmed like that. There's no right or wrong way, but you do have to treat people the right way. And I think that Sean Miller at Arizona, got a little bit too big for his britches for a lot of the money people there. And they're look, it's too much of a headache that's worth. We're going to move on from you. And so he winds up at Xavier's, done a good job there. But Sean Miller with a legal budget that he's going to have at Texas, Chris Del Conte's not messing around. That's one heck of a hire, in my opinion, for a guy who, went out and got DeAndre Ayton for $500,000 apparently before you could do that. And now $500,000, that's just what they had to pay AJ DeBonsa at BYU to talk to him. Yeah. He had to have a posting fee. He's getting a ridiculous amount of money from the Cougars for next year. And yeah, use Sean Miller with that budget and his coaching acumen and his ability to recruit. I think it's a great hire. I know that there are some that ho-hummed it, but I think it's a pretty good little hire there. Now, Texas, when it comes to basketball lately, is just good enough not to be good enough, and we'll see if he can get him over that hump.
I think he definitely can get him over that hump. When I saw that come across the wire today, I was oh, I like that a lot. I'm in your camp. I think that's a great hire for the University of Texas. And like we've been talking about all show long, now that you're in this mega conference that allows 14 teams to get into the postseason, you have to put yourself in a position to compete in the SEC with some of these other teams the way that they have been this year. You've got to try to find a way to run down Florida and run down Tennessee and run down Alabama and Kentucky. And I think this is a great way to do it with a veteran experienced coach who has proven time and again, whether or not you like it, whether or not it was legal, of course, but the product on the floor at Arizona was consistently good. If memory serves me right, Sean Miller never made a Final Four appearance when he was the head coach of the University of Arizona. I'm almost certain that was not the case, but that team was always in contention. They made Elite Eights. They were always a team that was in contention. I think Texas can be a similar team to those Arizona teams that he had in the earlier part of the decade.
Yeah. So, he he was Sweet 16 when he was at Xavier the first time. He replaced part of his other problem is he was replacing Lute Olson, who everybody in Tucson universally loves. Yes. If it came down to Lute Olson and the president, they'd be I'm sorry, Mr. President, you're in trouble. We've got to save Lute Olson from if it was our life raft game that we play, they'd be listen, Mr. President, you're going to have to paddle. You have to be in the water. I'm sorry. It's just not how it is, he was beloved in that state. And so I'm looking up his records to see.
I think he made an Elite
Eight. He made 1, 2, 3 Elite Eights and 2 Sweet 16s.
Yeah.
they got bounced in the first round. And look, he got fired after 3 mediocre years where they didn't make the tournament. And then that was in the midst of all of that. That was also right at the beginning of NIL. And so Arizona, didn't know. So he's been at Xavier for 3 years. Sweet 16, first year, NIT last year, and then this year, they won the playing game. His overall career record is very, very good. So, I mean, yeah, he's never popped through, but he also has never had the legal tools at his disposal that he has now. And I think it's a really good hire, especially based on how do you I saw Clarence Hill, who used to work at the Fort Worth Star Telegram and now works for All City DLS Sports. And he said, well, how do you hire a basketball coach now? You can't, you're just going to go, you can't really rip away Nate Oates or somebody like that because their situation, why, if you were Nate Oates, why would you leave Alabama? What can Texas give you that Alabama can't? Nothing. The budget's pretty similar. Now, Texas probably will spend a little bit more on basketball than Alabama might, but I think you're splitting hairs right there. So you either have to go hire somebody like Iowa did, like a Ben McCollum, who's won at the next level, and Texas, outside of Augie Garrido, they've never done that. They're never going to go to the lower level and pluck somebody because they can't sell that to Austin, Texas. They cannot do it. There's no way that Chris Del Conte could have, even though Ben McCollum's a great hire for Iowa, we'll talk about him in a second, he couldn't sell a Ben McCollum or a guy like that. They couldn't, Texas couldn't have hired a Kalen DeBoer. They really couldn't have. He just, because they would, Alabama probably had a hard time selling it because it's Alabama. Texas could not have sold it. It would have been well, how many great coaches has he coached under? It's well, not a lot. Not ones that you would know, but maybe some great coaches at the lower levels. But, nobody that you would probably have heard of. Okay, well, we don't want him. Steve Sarkisian had the blessing of Nick Saban, right?
Right, exactly.
And so that was fine. Tom Herman, they thought was the dude,
Right.
Charlie Strong, I don't think they ever really wanted. He was about their 5th choice, and they just kind of got painted in that corner. Mack Brown was the hot item in college football at North Carolina when he came there. But when you look at basketball, they went and got Chris Beard, ripped him away from Texas Tech. That was a big deal. They had to fire him. Yep. They had to. Yep. Ole Miss decided that whatever happened wasn't that big of a deal to them, and they'll have to live with that if it ever happens again to him while he's at Ole Miss. But and then Texas kind of got painted into a corner with Rodney Terry, where they went on. That was a really good team that was going to do big things, and they made this deep run, and then you're well, we can't. They came through, we fired the coach, the other guy came and took over, and he was the best recruiter anyway, and then, and then they had 2 years of, so he moves on, but I think this is a pretty darn good hire because I just don't think you can go. I mean, you can't call John Shire at Duke and be hey, you're coming to Texas, big boy. Yeah. It's not the same way in basketball.
No, it's not. And when you're talking about, some of these mid-tier hires, if you will, I always found it's a harder sell. I always found it to be a harder sell.
I've got some huge news. We have officially found the unlock to optimizing performance for young athletes. Now, for the past 15 years, I've been training quarterbacks, tons of camps, tons of college and NFL players. But for the last 3 years, my team and I have been on a mission to solve the questions that I was getting about what should young athletes, in particular athletes with developing bodies, what should they be consuming? I came to the conclusion that I think nutrition is actually the #1 opportunity as an athlete that you have to make an impact on all the work that you're putting in. Speaking directly to the parents, this is probably the #1 opportunity you have to make a huge impact on all the work and effort and resources that you've been putting in to give your young athlete an opportunity to chase their dreams. We've created Thread Performance to solve that problem. We're launching this summer with a suite of products that are absolutely going to change the game for your development. This is just the beginning of our mission to revolutionize sports nutrition specifically for young athletes. Give @Thread Performance a follow. The link in the bio, there's an opportunity to sign up for the waiting list and be the first to grab yours.
In college football than in college basketball, because I think there's a lot of really good coaches at the mid-major schools that you may not have heard of, or it's, to the average fan, like, well, who's this guy and where did he coach and why should I believe he's going to be the next great thing? There's a lot of really good head coaches at the mid-major schools that can come into a program like Texas, and even though you've never heard of him, he could be the next great coach. And not a lot of people want to give those kind of individuals the chance. And I've always found that a little bit discouraging because there's a lot of really good coaches out there in college basketball that just because you've never heard of their program or didn't follow their program doesn't mean he can't have the same similar type of success in a big conference or at a big school. I wish personally that the boosters, the alum, the fan base would give some of these guys a little bit more of a chance and have a little bit more of an open mind when some of these guys come to your school, because there's a lot of really good coaches out there.
Yeah. All right. So we'll end with yours. The one I say yours, the one that you're going to have to cover.
Yeah.
Minnesota, Nico Medved. I feel bad for Drake University, not like the rapper Drake. He made his own bed. I will comment on this. People can get so famous that they don't think that there's consequences for what they do or say.
Right.
And then, Drake, he thought, hey, I'm selling all these records. Nobody can touch me. And you're like, yeah, but, music's a weird thing where, talent and commercial success aren't necessarily running on parallel tracks all the time.
Sure.
I'm not saying he's not talented, but, there might be somebody who's way more talented than you that's maybe not as commercially successful because of their style, and maybe don't pick a fight with that guy because, it's kind of, the way I would compare it in the sports world, it's like thinking that the Spurs with Tim Duncan, because they're in San Antonio, weren't as good as the Lakers because the Lakers are in LA, and those Spurs teams just sent Kobe and Shaq Laker teams off out of the playoffs multiple times. They sent LeBron home, every all comers.
Yeah.
And if you'd been like, hey, we're Miami and LA, what's San Antonio, Texas?
Yeah.
You'd been like, but best power forward of all time lives there. Oh, an addendum to this in a second before we get into that. But actual Drake versus Kendrick Lamar, it's the same thing. Kendrick Lamar, maybe not as commercially popular, but still hella popular, and then way more talented. And just Garrett, am I wrong here? You're the expert.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, he's not as commercially popular, but he's not far off. I mean, he's doing the Super Bowl halftime show for a reason. Yeah. And then diss tracks for the most part are the worst songs that any artist does, because when you search for revenge, you dig two graves, right? Not Kendrick Lamar wrote a diss track that was the #1 song in the world for 40 weeks.
Yeah.
That's talent. So again, but Drake and Ben McCollum, I'm going to give you a little addendum. So my wife and I have been going back. We like to watch old amazing races. And so we're going backwards, right?
Yes.
We're going backwards. Well, there was one season 20 that had a couple, Ralph, and I want to say Vanessa. I don't think it was, but it's season 20. They're from San Antonio.
Okay.
And this season had two different couples who the dude was just a jackass.
Okay.
Just an absolute, we're almost to the finale right now. Actually, we are. I think this is the one we have to watch. But we look up, are these people, we're like, there's no way that these people are still together. So the one from San Antonio, Ralph and this girl, they definitely broke up. And I was like, they're going to break up right after this is over. And her boyfriend now is Tim Duncan. And you want to talk about a debilitating rebound?
What?
Yeah.
What?
So,
wow.
Yeah, Amanda's like, hey, she's dating Tim Duncan and has been since 2014 or 2015. And I'm like,
I got to look this up now. I can't wait till the end of the show. I have to look this up right now.
So it's season 20. It's season 20.
What was her name?
Oh, it's Ralph, and I can't remember what.
Ralph. Let's see. Now I got to look. Let's see. Let's see, Ralph. Oh, Vanessa.
Vanessa. Yeah, Ralph and Vanessa.
Let's see. I gotta. Wait. Wow, I'm stunned by this news.
Yeah.
She's into. Oh, you know what? I think I remember these two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the same season as Bopper and Mark.
Dude. Yes. Okay, as I know we're starting to get off the rails. Bopper and Mark, if you've never seen The Amazing Race, you need to go back and you need to watch that season. If you want to see that there is proof that you can cure all of humanity's ills and cure race relations in the United States, you go look at those two guys right there. Two friends from Kentucky.
From redneck-ass Kentucky.
Oh, as redneck as they got as thick of a Southern accent as these two guys have, and then
country-ass Kentucky.
Two great dudes. And it absolutely, when they came back to make an All-Stars appearance, I know I'm spoiling something a little bit here, but when they came back a few seasons later for, I think it was like All-Stars 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and they were the last team in, and I jumped off my couch.
And then Bopper got hurt and had to go home.
Bopper had to go home immediately because they did a physical on him, and it found out that his heart wasn't good enough to run the race. Yeah. And it was just... I went from elation to devastation all in the span of 5 minutes. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. It was great. Like, it was like, so, but I'm watching this and I'm thinking, look, I don't know. Like, I've not contacted a lot of my exes. You know, I didn't have a lot of, like, before I got married, I didn't have like a whole lot of serious relationships that like ended where it would be like, I wonder what she's doing now. You know, like It wasn't that, you know, so I'm not trying to brag or anything. It was pretty shameful, but, but I, so there wasn't, but I do know that like, had I broken up with a girl because I was an ass to her, and then she's like, oh yeah, you know who's not going to be an ass to me? The greatest effing power forward who ever lived.
Yeah.
Like, Tim Duncan won't be an ass to you. And I was like, you know what? Like, every time we watch it and he, like, says something to her, I'm like, I bet you Tim Duncan doesn't do that shit. Here's the deal. You're trying to run a race to win $1 million. Tim Duncan doesn't need to do that.
No.
No.
Tim Duncan sneezes $1 million. Like, I mean,
and here's the also least, like, endorsement-heavy superstar ever.
Yes.
Like, because he just doesn't.
God.
Yeah, no. And look, as a guy who loves the Spurs and Tim Duncan, I was like, yeah, there you go.
I never, you know what, as you know, I follow the NBA pretty closely and I have all my life. I mean, I never even thought about it until you said it out loud about how, yes, he was very undermarketed by the league for being as good as he was. Maybe in the early days.
And then he had, I can think of 2 commercials he did. Honestly, like, he probably had some shoe things and other things that, like, there was a Tim Duncan shoe, I'm sure, but it just wasn't like that big of a deal. But he had Gillette shaving cream with David Robinson.
Yeah,
when he was a rookie. And then here in Texas, he had HEB, which is like the Spurs' biggest local sponsor.
Right.
So that was it. Like, I didn't see, like, Tim Duncan was like, he was not like Tim Duncan for Alani Energy. You know, none of that stuff.
No, I was wondering. I'm trying to think if it was he a Sprite guy too. I'm not.
He might have been.
I can't remember.
And I promise you that that if he was, it was just Tim Duncan sitting in his locker with a Sprite in his hand.
Yeah,
like that's it. Like, that's it. Tim Duncan shooting, and like there's a Sprite logo on the ribbon board. Like, that's what it was. Because, and again, like, he's not a dude who is like a wash in personality. He's not like a big boisterous dude. No. And that's fine. That's, you know what that was worth? That was worth 5 rings.
Yeah,
that's what that was worth.
I don't care. Just as long as you're winning titles, just as long as you're not a scumbag off the court, you don't have to be the most boisterous guy in the world. Are you kidding me? I'd kill for 5 titles. Kill for it.
Yeah. I like, again, one of my favorite athletes of all time, Tim Duncan.
Yep.
So let's go back to these coaches. Drake University has lost. They have had 2 coaches, and this will be the 3rd coach in 3 years, because Darian DeVries went to West Virginia. Now he's at Indiana. And look, Indiana's in the same boat. Like, Darian DeVries did a pretty good job at West Virginia this year and got snubbed and didn't even have his best player, which is his kid, which he will have now at Indiana this year. They had him for like 3 whole weeks of the season, and they still fought through, and they got snubbed in the tournament. You and I talked about it last week. Well, he's off to Indiana. And then, so Ben McCollum, who they hired last year, who has 4, Division II national titles, who was like, he's the Krzyzewski of Division II, the Bill Self of Division II. He's now going to Iowa, an absolutely excellent hire. He will fit the culture at Iowa really well, the style of basketball they play. We just had him on the show last week, and he was great. I remember looking, it was right before the Indiana job opened up, and he was a candidate for that job. I knew he was going to get something. Iowa, great job replacing a guy who built their program up in Fran McCaffrey, who's out. But I think Ben McCollum to Iowa, another one out of the park.
Yeah, I totally agree. Doesn't have to travel very far to go from Drake to Iowa too. He stays in the state, and I think and that was the other thing too. When I saw Fran McCaffrey got let go, I thought to myself, even though Iowa had struggled the past 2 seasons, they didn't make the tournament the past 2 seasons. But in my mind, he was another one of those guys where I thought to myself, Fran McCaffrey is synonymous with Iowa basketball. It's like, how do you fire Fran McCaffrey? Are you kidding me? And I thought for a split second, I wondered if Minnesota would flirt with Fran McCaffrey for a hot minute. But I know that hire probably wouldn't have gone terribly well with the fan base. But when you're talking about the University of Minnesota, and, as some people might know already now, they hired Nico Medved out of Colorado State. And one thing, while I do agree that I think he's got great coaching chops and he did a phenomenal job at Colorado State, when I saw it, and Paul, let's be honest, this was kind of the worst kept secret around here for the last 2 weeks. It seemed like it was going to be absolutely obvious that Nico was going to be the guy here at the University of Minnesota. I winced a little bit. I did the face because, and the reason why I say that is because after living here for 7 years, you have to understand that Minnesotans are obsessed with Minnesotans.
Yeah.
And it didn't go well for the women's program when they hired Lindsay Whalen. It didn't go well for the men's program when they hired Ben Johnson. And a lot of that was kind of out of Ben's control. But when I saw that, I even though I do agree that Nico is a good coach, my initial reaction was, are we sure he was the best candidate for the job? And am I sure that Mark Coyle, the athletic director for the University of Minnesota, didn't go out and target him immediately because he was a Minnesotan? Was that how much of that was a primary factor in trying to bring him in? I know he has previous ties to the school. I know that he's an alum. I totally get it. It's an easy sell to the fan base. He's one of us. People love saying that here. He's one of us. Okay, great. Was that going to translate into winning? Was he absolutely the best candidate out there? Those are the questions that I have.
Yeah, no, I think, and those are fair. I think Nico Medved, though, he's pretty accomplished coach. Look,
no doubt.
Again,
no doubt.
And this brings us into that. He is, I'm sure, excited about going back to his alma mater and being in Minnesota and all of that. I'm sure he's getting a massive raise. Yeah. All those things, all those things are good. I promise you, right now, he is sitting in a room going, "Dude, what? Was that a travel? I thought it was a travel. They didn't think it was a travel. And then some people think it's a travel. Some people didn't think it was a travel. Gene Steratore said, well, because we couldn't really tell that he had total control of the ball." And I'm like, that dude took 3 steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was 2 steps. That's what I know. And then from years of watching the NBA, I know that if you take 3 or more steps but finish it off with something awesome, they will not call traveling.
Yeah.
They will not. But you have to finish it off with something awesome. That was the David Stern directive of, listen, if a cool thing happens at the end, not traveling, unless it's just too obvious.
Right.
But if a cool thing happens at the end, not traveling. If a stupid thing happens at the end, traveling. Or if a good thing was never going to happen, traveling. But if a cool thing happens, that's traveling. So that was very much in the NBA traveling thing, because a cool thing happened at the end, and that Derek Queen, a freshman who's a bit of a biscuit baby, right? A bit of a gravy boy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw D Queen on the screen, I thought he's been to a couple of D Queens in his life. I'm talking Dairy Queen. That's what I like about Texas. Which I found out other Dairy Queens don't have steak fingers and tacos. other parts in the world. And I'm like, what
Yeah,
are you?
I'm not familiar with those, especially in the California ones that I grew up going to.
Oh, I mean, what are you, Dairy Queen? What are you doing? We're trying to spread our culture, okay?
Yeah.
It'd be like Panda Express not having orange chicken.
Yeah,
What are you doing?
Oh, good.
Yeah,
good
what
God.
are you doing? Like, we only have orange chicken in the places that like are really, like the really cool places.
Panda Express could get rid of their entire menu and have only the orange chicken, and I think it would still be just as
I actually
successful.
think that like when they started out, they only had orange chicken and
probably.
like one other thing.
Probably.
Like, okay, you don't like chicken, here's like a big mess of veggies with sweet and sour sauce on them.
Yeah.
Like that was probably it, and then they expanded their menu. Yeah, they could only like, what are you doing? Like, I know that the like you go for the ice cream, but I mean,
it doesn't hurt to expand your mind a little bit and take a look at the menu.
this is how I found out. I was at Amanda and I were at a Dairy Queen, and her friend called, and I was like, ooh, hey, they have new tacos. Like, they have a special on tacos. I'm going to come back and get that for lunch one day this week while the special's still on, because it was like 4 tacos for $5 or something like that. It was a great deal. And then her best friend's son was in the car and like, your Dairy Queen has tacos? I'm like, yeah, you bet your ass they do. What do you mean your Dairy Queen doesn't have tacos? Like, hold on. Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm glad that like, one of the benefits to living in Texas is the full Dairy Queen menu. It's like when you go to like a foreign country and McDonald's has like duck confit, and you're like, how did this happen?
I'll never forget when I went to a McDonald's in Italy and they were serving beer there. And I was like 16 or 17 years old or whatever. And I was like, they have beer here at McDonald's? And of course we got it.
I'll have a quarter pounder with cheese and a Peroni, please.
Yeah. Sounds, they said coming right up. That sounds like a lovely afternoon if you ask me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, you get it. Yeah. So, but yeah, let's see. What other coaches? Will Wade, NC State. NC State made an absolutely wonderful decision.
Yeah,
like this dude is, one, he can straight up and down coach on the floor, and 2, he can recruit. Like the guy can absolutely recruit. Tim Brando on the show last week and said, look, he got busted because he said we got to make him a strong-ass offer. Strong-ass offer is what he should put on the T-shirts. Yeah. NC State, strong-ass offer. Yeah. Like that's what they should do. And NC State's 1 year removed from being in the Final Four because of another gravy boy, biscuit baby, DJ Burns.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So because of him, like, hey, like they could go back really fast. They clearly are motivated to be at that level. And man, I love the hire. FSU, Leonard Hamilton retired this year. Will Wade was my top choice for the last few years for them to go get, because I was like, look, hey, that's the guys doing the things that you want to do. They hired an alum, Luke Laux, who was with the Kings. Luke Laux was with the Kings, and that's the other thing that's going on is you either hire guys like Will Wade or you do what BYU did. They hired Kevin Young working out for him in the Sweet 16, and you hire an NBA guy who knows how to deal with basketball players with tudes.
Yes, correct.
Because
Ryan Odom was the other hire too. We left that one. That was the one that clicked in my head during the break. I was like, Ryan
Odom at Virginia. Yeah. And that's another one that's going to be interesting. Like, will Virginia like play actual basketball now?
Oh man, God.
Like, will they? Like, I appreciate good defense.
Sure.
But I would also like to see, like, when you stop the other team from scoring, if you would take that basketball, go to the other side, and put it in the basket.
The feelings that I had earlier in the show when we were talking about the actual product of men's college basketball, Virginia under Tony Bennett, to which I feel stupid. And yes, anybody watching will call me an idiot for even saying this because I know he won a national title and Virginia was in the conversation nearly every single year that he was at the helm. But Virginia might as well be the poster child for what I'm talking about in terms of exciting quality product of men's college basketball. Virginia was at the bottom of the barrel in terms of, I'm not watching Virginia on a Tuesday night. You think I'm going to watch a game that finishes 53-50? You think I want to watch that game?
That's an offensive explosion. I watched one that finished 48-41
Yeah.
And only because Virginia had free throws at the end.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm caught in the middle here because how am I going to argue with winning? I can't. It's the
No,
bottom.
but like,
but when you're trying to sell a product, there's a sales as a head coach too. When you're a head coach and when you're an athletic director, you already know going into those jobs, you have to have an element of a salesman in you because you got to sell this product.
You know, before now Baylor won the national title because they had several excellent defensive players on that team. Davion Mitchell is one of the best defensive players I've ever seen in my life. And he's still that way in the NBA.
He is.
Been traded around a lot in a short time, but that's the nature of the beast when you're good but not great in the NBA.
I love him in Miami, by the way. I think that's such a great fit for where he is. I love him in Miami.
Yeah. Jared Butler, excellent defensive player. Maceo Teague, who's not in the NBA, who's playing professional basketball, though. Maceo Teague was an excellent defensive player. And Mark Vidal, literally, if you could put basketball defense into a syringe, he would shoot it into his veins. He loves it. And so they had 4 guys that were absolutely A+ on defense. A+. And that happened over time. But when he was building this program, he didn't say hey guys, we're going to play the best defense in the country.
Right.
He's we're going to run and gun and everybody's going to score points and it's going to be fun. Yeah. And the thing is that to get the players he needed to get people to get excited about it, he knew he had to have scorers. Now, did it undo them, I think, a few times early on when they were making runs in the tournament that they weren't good on defense? Yeah. But the thing is, he would not have been able to build the program if he'd been guys, I want you to watch basketball from 1963. That's what we're going to do here. If you listen, it's black and white and it's pretty much still segregated, but the style is what we want. Yeah, no, that wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked.
And I think I remember, I think it was my first year. If it wasn't my first year, it was my second year in Waco. And the type of team you were describing too was the opposite of those defensive teams with Perry Jones, Quincy Miller, Quincy Acey, I think who else was on that team.
Quincy liked to play D, but yeah.
Yeah, they could play D. They're done that. They could play D, but a lot of those games were in the high 70s, low 80s kind of games. And that team went as far as it could against that Kentucky team. Was that the Anthony Davis team in the Elite Eight?
Yeah, that was the Elite Eight. Yeah, that was the Anthony Davis team. Yeah. That was the last time John Calipari did anything worthwhile.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So, anyway, Pierre, I think you and I also need to start a campaign, and I want to know if you're with me on it. Wofford had a guy, a big man, who shot his free throws underhand. And
how did that slip my attention, by the way?
Oh, you got to go back and look. Rick Barry did it forever. Wilt Chamberlain shot his free throws underhand. I think now that NIL is a thing, that points equals paid. Points equals wins, wins equals paid. That if you are under a 75% free throw shooter, and I would even argue under 80, but I'm willing to compromise.
Sure.
If you are under 75%, you should shoot your free throws underhand and make millions. Points equal money.
I love it.
Yeah. Are you on board? We're going to keep doing this every week. We're going to make a PSA.
I'm fully on board with this. I kind of feel like we've been coming up with things on a weekly basis that have just been $1 million ideas.
I'm going to get all the co-hosts on board on this. So we have a group, a collective. Yeah. All right. 1 for 1. Points equals money.